The research and national defense facilities of the Oak Ridge Reservation are vital parts of our nation's scientific community. To continue to meet these needs, parts of the reservation require cleanup from the impacts of years of energy research. The Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board is the voice of the community, providing input to the U.S. Department of Energy on its environmental cleanup of the reservation. To learn more about this important work, you're invited to attend meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board.
I want to welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. Now, you'll notice that you're seeing different people up here tonight. We've got a number of our folks who are at the Waste Management Conference out in Phoenix this week. So Ed Trujillo and I will conduct the meeting, and we hope we do it according to Hoyle.
To the procedures.
To the procedures, right. Okay. The first thing that I want to say is that anyone that is speaking, please remember to use your microphones such that your voice will be recorded correctly on our video. Okay. Now, I'm usually the prime offender of that, so if I'm not in the microphone, you guys hold up your hand and say, hey, it's you. Okay. As far as announcements are concerned, in April, we will not have a board meeting because our board is hosting the spring chairs meeting, and it's going to be April 19th through the 21st, and it's going to be centered over at the Doubletree Hotel. All right, so we can't do both, and it's time for us to shine, so that's where our concentration will be. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the meeting tonight. All right, we're going to go forward with comments from our regulatory bodies, and we'll start out with Ms. Noe.
First, I wanted to, Alfreda had already mentioned the fact that Sue Cange and Dave Adler and Belinda Price and Dave Himmelwright are not here because they're at the Waste Management Symposium this week. Oak Ridge is a featured site, so we have quite a few participants out there. I also wanted to say that, the work is continuing on the demolition of building K27. Also, as Alfreda mentioned, we are preparing for the spring chairs meeting, which is April 19th through 21st. You'll get more details about that towards the end of the present meeting. We also have scheduled a budget workshop. We've not gotten the dates nailed down. It'll be mid-April, early to mid-April. It's going to be to discuss the FY18 budget. This will be similar to what we've done the past 2 years. So this presentation we'll be doing tonight will kind of help give you the background of what happens with the budget so that you'll be better prepared to deal with the actual budget meeting workshop that we have. And that's all I have right now.
Okay, very good, thank you. Then from Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, Mr. Christoph Sartoriski.
Thank you. At this moment, I don't have any comments or announcements. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's now time for our public comment period, and Elena Joldersma actually will open that period for comment.
Right. The public comment period is now open. Are there any members in the public who would like to comment? Seeing none, as the Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on Environmental Cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate in our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comment section of the SSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Meeting schedules and ways to communicate with the board can be obtained by calling 241-4583 or by visiting our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. All right, now our presentation tonight is going to be the FY 2018 budget formulation and prioritization of projects. And it's going to be presented by Karen Thompson. All right, now, Karen, if you'll come on up, and Ed Trujillo will read a little bit about you to familiarize the board with your credentials.
Oh, Karen. Thompson is a branch chief for the Planning and Baseline
Management Branch for the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management. In this capacity, she supports the Division Director and the Associate Director of the Planning and Execution Division, and the integrated project teams in the strategic planning, budget development, and performance tracking and reporting. Previous to her selection in November 2014, she was a project control lead for the East Tennessee Technology Park work scope. She has also served as the K-25 Historic Preservation Coordinator between July 2012 and June 2015. Karen has 15 years of federal service at the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management, and she has extensive training in project management and scheduling.
Thank you. Okay, at any time, at any given point in time, the Department of Energy has 3 active budgets. We have the FY16 enacted budget, which is where we get the current year funding where we're executing work scope in the field. We have the FY17 President's Budget Request, which was submitted to Congress in February, and it's going through the cycle where it will be eventually become our appropriation. And then we have the FY18 budget, which is currently being developed. Okay, to develop the President's budget, it takes about a year from the beginning of the cycle to the completion of the cycle when it's submitted to Congress. Around the January-February timeframe, we have a lot going on. We get guidance. We start to get guidance from headquarters, from EM headquarters, that tells us what we need to be planning to. And then we also start developing the FY18 to 22 budget. It's a 5-year budget window that we develop at a time. We concentrate on FY18, but we plan through FY22. And at the same time, we start meeting with our stakeholders to develop milestones, to go over what they believe our priorities are so that we can incorporate all that into our planning. And around the April-May timeframe, we actually submit our budget to our headquarters EM office. At that point, the budget becomes embargoed, and we can't share it outside the department. And for about an 8-month period, there are discussions that take place between the Office of Management and Budget, EM headquarters, and the field, questions and answers, and changes to the budget. And around the August, September, late summer, early fall time frame, we actually prepare the budget that's submitted to OMB. And once that goes through, the deliberations continue for several more months, and then in early February, the budget's actually released by the President's office to Congress. So over the past couple of years, Oak Ridge's budget has been in between $360 and $390 million per year in the President's request. As you can see, Congress has been pretty generous. We had a $36 million increase in our enacted budget in FY14 between the President's request and what we received in the appropriation. It was $46 million in FY15, and it's $102 million in FY16 to the President's request. The one thing that I really would like to point out is that if you'll notice, there are 3 different types of appropriations. We have the D&D fund, and it can only be used for gaseous diffusion cleanup. So only 3 sites are eligible to utilize that funding: Oak Ridge, Portsmouth, and Paducah. And then we have the non-defense funding at the bottom. That's where our historic preservation funding is. That's the only thing that we have in that category. And all the remainder of our work in Oak Ridge, besides the ETTP cleanup work, is in the defense appropriation. So that's something that I wanted to point out, that those are different types of funding, and they can't cross. You have to use it for what it's appropriated for. Oak Ridge's budget, you can see I've I've got FY16 and FY17. I was going to talk a few minutes about what the different parts of our program and what we're doing. For the U-233 material disposition, the President's request was $26 million, and we received $35. And that additional $9 million is being used to help accelerate our processing of the U-233 material. We received a sizable increase to TRUE operations, and that's where we process the RH and the CH TRUE debris, and that's what that will be used for. We had, there was nothing for the sludge build-out in the budget, but we continue to do some design work on that. Safeguards and security, we had a small decrease in that amount of funding. The Outfall 200, we got about a $2.6 million increase on that, and we're continuing design. For the EM facilities, S&M and waste operations, there's an increase in that about $7 or $8 million, and that is being used to upgrade the liquid, gaseous, and process waste operations. There's some system issues that needed to be addressed to make that system more efficient and extend its life cycle, and that's what we're doing with that. And then we're able to do some low-level waste activities. And then the next category is excess facilities at ORNL and Y12, and we got a $27 million increase in that. And there are 7 facilities that are deteriorating structurally that we know that we're not going to be able to D&D for a longer period of time. And so this fund is set aside to do work on those, to put a roof on the Alpha 4 building so that when we do get ready to do work in it, it's safe, and that it's safe until we're able to do that. The biology complex, we're doing some characterization there. And then there's 5 facilities at ORNL where we're going to do some characterization work so that whenever we are able to, so everything is in a safe and compliant state until we're able to do the work, and then we have the data we need to be able to dispose of that eventually. And then stakeholder support with steady technology development is about the same. Historic preservation, we got a $6 million increase. That is for completing the design of the equipment building, the viewing tower, and the history center that are part of our CERCLA ARARs, where we actually had an agreement, a multi-party agreement to preserve the significance of K25 because we couldn't preserve the building. So it's a way to commemorate that, and we have a memorandum of agreement with 12 different parties, and that's what that is for. And then ETTP cleanup got about a $35 million increase, and that is to support our vision to finish ETTP by 2020. So when we're planning our budgets, there are certain principles that guide us. Our number one principle is to protect human health and environment. And we sequence our work based on these principles. We comply with regulatory requirements, and then the last objective is to support our ongoing DOE missions on the reservation. So at ETTP, it's to support reindustrialization and an eventual transfer of that for private use, and to commemorate the K25 footprint as part of the national park, and then to support the NNSA mission at Y12 and the science mission at ORNL. We also have long-term goals that the big one that we have coming on the horizon very quickly is to complete all of the gaseous diffusion facilities at ETTP by the end of 2016. K27 demolition is underway. It is the last gaseous diffusion building at ETTP. So we are on our way to meet that goal. Vision 2020 is our goal to finish the cleanup of all of the facilities at ETTP and close ETTP up by 2020. And then Vision 2024 is for us to take what we've learned there and go to Y12 and start addressing the mercury contaminated facilities. So when we do budget development, we do it in windows. So from FY16 through 18, those are our near-term priorities. That's most of what I just talked about. Our number one priority is to maintain safe and compliant operations. We're going to complete the design of the outfall 200 mercury treatment facility at Y12, complete the direct disposition campaign for the U-233, we're going to continue to process CH and RH debris at the True Waste Processing Center, to design and construct the sludge test facility, and to complete the circle planning for EMDF, and finally to complete K27 demolition. So we focus on our short term, the first year of the budget window and what we're currently executing, and then we look at farther down the road. There are more unknowns, but our priorities are to transition U-233 through the processing campaign, to process what we have there, to continue the debris processing and resume shipments of CH and RH, to complete ETTP cleanup, to actually construct the outfall 200 mercury treatment facility, to address critical infrastructure problems at ORNL and Y12. We're going to complete the design and construct EMDF and design the sludge processing facility. And finally, even after we get all that done, we've still got a lot to do. So after the 5-year budget window, post-2022, we have activities in our plan to address groundwater, to complete the processing of the remaining U-233 material, to construct the sludge processing facility, and then to complete the cleanup that we have in our plan at Y12 and ORNL. But in order to do that, we need your input. So during this process, the next couple of months while we're developing the 18 budget, we're going to receive guidance from headquarters toward the end of the March. We will be conducting the public workshop that Melissa talked about in the first couple of weeks in April. We will receive formal recommendations from you guys on our 18 priorities. We'll evaluate the input from you, from all of our stakeholders, from EPA and TDEC, and we'll roll that in and use that in our formulation, and then we will submit our budget request in April. And that's pretty much how we prioritize. If you have any questions.
All right. Questions first would be from the board, and then after the board has satisfied their concerns, then we'll have questions from the public. All right, so first one is Greg Paulus.
Karen, thank you. A couple of general questions. We had a really wonderful windfall this year in money.
Yes, sir.
Has that caused any pain and suffering? It can be as difficult to spend more as it is to spend less.
That is true. But we have planned our work for our entire life cycle. And so what it was for us was resequencing our existing plan to figure out.
Were your contractors able to man up for the increased activity?
We actually have some work that we've already got we've already got, we had contracts in place to cover that work that we were able to accelerate.
Okay.
And we have mechanisms in place to deal with that, and we're working through that process right now.
So minimal growing pains.
It's, yes,
And then a
sir.
follow-up to that is because the government, this wonderful thing that you all are part of and we all support, is there any possibility that the budget world will say, well, you got such a wonderful windfall last year, you're going to take it in the shorts next year?
Well,
Is there that possibility?
well, I think when you have 435 people determining your fate any given year, then that's always a possibility. But I think if you look at the way our budgets have changed over time, we've continually been supported. And there's no real way to answer that question because it's up to Congress. So, but I think this year we have a good plan, and I think that the Recovery Act, our experience back in 2009, getting a whole bunch of work going at one time, really taught us how to plan those things, and I think that we're in a really good position. Thank you. You're welcome.
I think Mr. Trujillo, Ed, is next.
Thank you, Karen. Good job.
Thank you.
See, to follow up Greg's comment on the windfall, during this long process and kind of a cycling process of budget generation, approval, and all that, does Congress or anybody give you a hint that, hey, Karen, there's going to be a lot more money next year? Is there any kind of a hint they kind of drop? So that I can understand Greg's concern about manning up is hard. Resources are tight sometimes, and you got $100 million to spend. I was just wondering if they give you any hints that really is going to be something
We don't get
coming up.
During this part of the cycle, we don't really hear a lot. And once the conferences start releasing their information, that would be when we hear anything. So if we did, it would be later. So.
All right, and on a different topic, the Vision 2020 that you have, does that is the plan to spend a heck of a lot more money for in Y12, you know, the deteriorating buildings and stuff like that? Because I remember when I worked there, talking about 2003, they worry about at that time that, you know, the roofs were deteriorating. Some of the things are really going down. Now we're talking about 2016. Between now and 2020, are they going to really pinpoint more stuff in Y12?
We actually have a plan that prioritizes, that we've worked with ORNL and we've worked with ORNL and Y12 together, a joint plan that tells where we think there may be problems and prioritize that based on risks. So when we get funding that's for excess facilities, then we use that as a tool to prioritize that. And so we have in our baseline all of the EM-owned facilities and facilities that are owned by Science and NNSA that we know have to be cleaned up. So I think that we have a good comprehensive plan. I guess I don't, am I answering your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so. I guess maybe I wasn't very clear. I guess the question was, is there any idea of accelerating some of the cleanup in Y12?
Well, that's what Vision 2024 is, to start the mercury facilities. Are you asking, are we going to accelerate it before we finish ETTP?
Yes.
Okay. Our plan is to finish ETTP by 2020, and then we're currently working on characterizing some of the facilities at Y12. That's part of what we're doing with the extra funding that we got.
Yeah, and of course we realize that the excess facilities are 27.7
Yes, sir.
million. As years pass, between now and 2020 are probably going to get, it's going to get increased, I imagine, because buildings will get worse as days go by, you know.
We're hoping to eliminate some of the problems that our goal is to make those facilities safe for workers when we do get the funding to demolish them or clean them out or whatever our plan is for it. Our goal is to stabilize them so that it's safe for our people to work in and it's safe for them to sit there until, for whatever indefinite period, till we get the funding.
All right, thanks, Karen.
That was the article that Sue was quoting.
Right.
Okay. All right, Bob Hatcher.
Thank you, Karen, for a nice, succinct presentation, well-organized and all. My question is, that this is a kind of a special year right now. Unless you've been hibernating, you don't know what's going on. But is there any impact with the election that's coming up on the planning for your budget for subsequent years now? So do you anticipate any impact on your budget request or the president's budget or anything like that might be revised in light of the election and what could happen or may not happen?
We haven't heard anything to that effect.
Okay.
So we will continue our normal planning cycle, and we plan based on our priorities, and we'll continue to do that. So we don't. I think we haven't heard anything. Yes, sir. We carry on business as usual.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dennis Wilson.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the historic preservation,
Yes, sir.
and that's part of the bonus this year. You said there was a memo of understanding between 8 different parties,
12.
12 different parties?
Yes, sir.
And is all of the funding coming through the EM budget for that historic?
Yes, sir. Is your question, is it part of the Park Service? No,
Yes.
sir. This is a separate agreement.
Okay.
This was agreed to in 2012.
Yeah.
Before the Park Service legislation, and it is actually, it was part of the CERCLA process to commemorate the significance of K-25 because it was a signature facility from the Manhattan Project. And the department agreed to certain stipulations, and so part of that was that we would construct a viewing tower and a history center in the fire station at ETGP, and an equipment building that replicated the exterior of K-25. And that funding is for that agreement, executing that agreement.
Okay. And there's nothing needed in the out years to continue that agreement? I don't see anything listed, that's all.
The president's budget had nothing in 17 for that.
Okay.
So we're in the design phase now, so there will be construction eventually.
And that's not part of your planning phase?
We are planning, we're still in the preliminary design phase,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christoph.
Yes, thank you. I would like to stress a few things here, and I agree the presentation was very well, put together and presented.
Thank you.
There are some things here that State of Tennessee stressed to DOE, and we continue to stress. One of them is that State of Tennessee, as well as EPA, is a regulator. And we bring this up to DOE's attention on occasion because we're being lumped into the same box as other stakeholders. In reality, the cleanup on Oak Ridge Reservation is a cleanup, through the FFA agreement.
Yes,
and you have 3 parties that negotiate and agree on milestones.
Yes, sir.
So when I see on page number 3, when you see on the chart that we submit advice to the sites, actually what we were providing in the past was the letter where we're either supporting or stating that we beg to differ and maybe we're asking for a little bit more funding from
Right.
headquarters for the cleanup on Oak Ridge Reservation. Another thing I would like to stress that in partnership with DOE, State of Tennessee agreed to reduce the number of milestones. We agreed to have only significant milestones. We didn't want to bug DOE in so many documents and so many different milestones. At the same time, we had understanding with DOE that State of Tennessee is expecting a funding level at $420 million a year. A reduced number of milestones resulted with smaller presidential requests to Congress. So we are seeing here that our agreement potentially backfired. And we always have a principal difference with Department of Energy. State of Tennessee and I believe EPA also takes the position that we should have a cleanup milestones that should affect the funding levels. DOE's position is that funding, presidential funding, is comes first, and milestones are coming second. What we are seeing here, that for example, while talking on a page 5 of presentation, you have an entry line here for sludge build-out. We are talking about a project which is to treat transuranic sludges on the Oak Ridge Reservation. We agree with DOE that this is a very important project. We have a very dangerous waste, and we agreed to give DOE more time to prepare better, to plan better, to have a make-up test facility, to make sure that we're going to do the right way, that we're not going to have any accidents, that we're going to do it in a safe and sensible manner. However, by our agreement to give DOE more time on this project, this agreement again resulted with reduction in DOE budget. At the same time, we had some other projects on Oak Ridge reservations that were hoping that they can be finished and completed ahead of time. One of them, which is dear to my heart, is a Trench 13, is the transuranic waste in ground. So what we are seeing here is that we're trying to be a partner. We want to work with DOE. We strongly believe that the DOE EM program here in Oak Ridge is doing the same, is trying to work with us. We just see the pattern that if we do not have enough milestones, other sites which might have more milestones, like Savannah River, are obtaining more funding. We are very glad that Congress is providing some plus-ups. And in line with this, we brought already to your attention that we would like to have some acceleration, would like to bring some milestones forward. If we have some more money, okay, can we get some more work schedule? Can we bring something up front? And as I understand, DOE is going to address our letter and it's going to provide us with the response. We might not get everything what we're asking, but at least we're trying to work and see if some more work can be done. This is also very important, and I think that Ed was asking a question about Vision 2024.
Yes, sir.
We have two funds. We have a defense fund and we have a gaseous diffusion plants fund, which is a D&D fund.
Yes.
Our concern is that with the completion of work on Oak Ridge Reservation, we are depleting the D&D fund. To keep up the pace of cleanup at Y12 at RNL, we need to have some more money coming in a defense fund too, because we cannot use the D&D fund from ETTP for cleanup at Y12. To get some of that money, again, we would like to have some more milestones. And that's why we're asking DOE to agree to have some extra milestones at Y12 and to perform cleanup under remedial action. Right now, we have an action memorandum, and DOE would like to complete cleanup at Y12 under a removal action authority. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure that your letter will be addressed. As for the milestones, I'm not part of that discussion, so I can't really answer that, but I will go back and make sure that Dave Adler has seen, that he's seen your letter, and I'll follow up on that.
Once more time, we are working with DOE, and we are happy about the way we have developed our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's we're gonna be fighting for a cleanup, and I know that you guys are working very hard to help us.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do we have any comments from the public? All right. With that said, we do thank you. It was a very nice presentation.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Everybody knows that we have a diverse mission on the Oak Ridge Reservation. Because of that diversity, we generate a variety of wastes, and those wastes require a variety of treatment and disposal methods. The types of waste that we generate is non-radiological, non-hazardous waste. Now, we have treatment options on site for those. Those are the types of waste as cafeteria waste, office waste, and also clean building debris from our D&D operations. We also generate hazardous waste, and that's strictly, this one is strictly hazardous waste, non-rad waste. We have no capabilities to treat that waste on site, so it's treated by a commercial vendor off site. We also generate toxic waste. That's pretty much your PCBs. Again, they're non-rad. We send them off to a commercial vendor for treatment and disposal. We also generate liquid low-level waste. We do have capabilities on site at the liquid waste gaseous operations, but for those wastes that do not meet the waste acceptance criteria that at the LGWO, we have to send that off to off-site vendors for treatment and disposal. We also generate solid low-level radioactive waste. We have on-site capabilities at the EMWMF. We have off-site capabilities at NNSS in Nevada, and waste that do not meet the waste acceptance criteria at either one of those, which is a priority for us to send to a DOE facility, go to two commercial vendors for treatment and disposal. We also treat transuranic waste on site. Once treated, that's sent off to the WIP facility in New Mexico. We generate mixed waste, which is hazardous waste or toxic waste that's contaminated with radioactivity. We do not have capabilities on site to treat those types of waste, so those all go off site for commercial. We also generate mixed waste that's solid, and again, we don't have the capabilities on site to treat that. We have capabilities to dispose on site at the EMWMF. We have capabilities off-site at NNSS in Nevada, and we also have commercial vendors that treat and dispose of the solid waste that don't meet the WACs at either one of those facilities. Whenever we generate waste, we follow a hierarchy, and that hierarchy has two tenets. One is, the first is, it has to meet the environmental regulations. The second is we're looking for the most cost-effective option available. So, as expected, recycle reuse would be our most cost-effective option out there because it generally doesn't cost us any money to recycle reuse. But because of our operations, there's significant restrictions on recycling waste from the reservation. So we don't use that often, but we'll talk about one particular example later. Our second option is ORR landfills. That's the cheapest disposal option we have and will have on the Oak Ridge Reservation. So if we're able to meet the WACs, we prefer to send it to the Oak Ridge landfills. The third is EMWMF, and that's our circular landfill. And We'd prefer to keep it on site. It's reduces the transportation hazards of shipping off-site. It's also more cost-effective than shipping across the country to NNSS or Clive, Utah. And then finally, we have ship off-site. If we cannot meet the WACs or meet the requirements of the first three, we ship it to NNS first. That's free disposal to us because that's a DOE facility. Or someone like EnviroCare in Clive, Utah. I really don't know who come up with this picture. I really thought it was Melissa tormenting me because I'm not a UT fan, but it is a pretty good visual of how much waste, legacy waste, we've disposed of over the years. But as of FY12, the beginning of FY12, we still had 501 containers of some of the toughest waste well, it was the toughest waste remaining in storage. A lot of that waste, there was no identified path for disposal. So we took it on ourselves to challenge ourselves to go back, look at historical records and data, and find a treatment and disposal option for this waste. So as of today, we've reduced that number to 32. That's all we have left. That's given us an opportunity to close down some of the storage facilities at ATTP and reindustrialize those areas. So that was good for our programmatic mission. The second one, the legacy mercury, I told you we look for cost-effective options. In FY12, the only bid we had on that waste was for $4.7 million for treatment and disposal. So we went back and looked at records. We developed and prepared a request to the EPA from the treatment standards of the Resource Conservation Recovery Act and asked them that we could dispose of that directly. That was approved, and now we'll dispose of that for $120,000. So it's quite a savings to the taxpayers. The last one is the recycling. This is another recent initiative, real innovative approach. And if you would go to the next slide, it'll give the folks an opportunity to see what's going on. This is an old vintage 1940 switchyard out at ETTP. Historically, this is not a RAD facility, not a contaminated area. So with that in mind, we could meet the moratorium requirements for recycling of the metal. All this you see here is all copper. These were bus bars out here that supported the structure of the site. And I forget, but I think they've shipped off about $100,000 worth of copper to date. All this other steel structure, they'll be able to recycle this. Some of these insulators and such, they'll have to dispose of at the Oak Ridge landfills possibly, but it's a really innovative approach that saved us a lot of money and met our hierarchy. And that's all I have.
But it's good to be here. I was asked to talk about some of the waste management facilities that we have at Oak Ridge National Lab. So the briefing I'm going to provide is going to talk about the liquid gaseous waste operations facilities that we have at the lab and the transuranic waste processing center there that processes the transuranic waste. Let's see, is this working? Okay. So first of all, the liquid gaseous waste operations. It consists of 64 or so facilities, and facilities in this sense of the word includes manholes and pump stations and pipelines and ventilation facilities and the whole gamut of types of facilities that's comprised of the system, as well as about 20 miles of piping around the downtown area of ORNL. Mostly, and interconnecting piping between Bethel Valley and Melton Valley for some of the liquid low-level waste pipelines. It treats processed water as well as groundwater. A good component of what's processed in the processed waste treatment facility that I'll talk about in a minute is groundwater. And exhaust from building ventilation systems at the lab, from not only process labs at the Office of Science, but EM EM buildings that are in standby condition, ventilation is maintained on them as well, and that's pumped out through the gaseous waste system. So we're talking about three separate systems here: the liquid low-level waste system, the process waste system, and the gaseous waste systems. Your liquid low-level waste, pretty low volume per year, 120,000 gallons or so. Process up to 110 million gallons. That's where the bulk of the waste, liquid waste goes. And then the gaseous system has 100,000 or so cubic feet per minute of air that's discharged out of the stack. And so I'll talk about each one of these real quickly. First of all, the liquid low-level waste system. The liquid low-level waste system treats the higher activity liquid low-level waste that's generated primarily out at the REDC, Radiochemical Environmental Development Complex, which is an Office of Science facility where most of the medical isotope work is done. Collection facility at the Bethel Valley campus, which is building 2099. It's a series of tanks and pump stations to get it there, as well as the liquid low-level waste collection system at REDC, building 7966. And you can see they're basically tanks. It's kind of hard to see in the photo, but there's tank systems that are used to batch store waste that's generated from these facilities. And then once every couple of weeks or so, they pump water from these tanks over to the liquid low-level waste evaporator. The evaporator is used as a volume reduction step. It's a no discharge system other than the steam that comes. Actually, even the steam and the overheads are captured. So the overheads are treated and they're condensed and routed to the process waste system, and I'll talk about it in a minute. The concentrated liquid low-level waste then becomes the sludge component that we pump over to Melton Valley to be stored in the Melton Valley storage tanks and the Melton Valley capacity increase tanks that are over there. And those are the future sludges that'll be processed at the Transionic Waste Processing Center when we get ready to do the sludge in a few years from now. I've mentioned the 120,000 gallons a year is about the amount of water that's produced. Let me back up a second, though, and just talk about the LGWO as a whole. I meant to mention this, and I forgot to look at my notes, but on the previous slide, I was going to mention that the budget for these facilities typically runs for the entire LGWO complex, typically runs about $23 million a year. This year, Sue mentioned we got the extra funding, and $5 million of that extra funding is going to be used to fund some of the deferred maintenance of the facilities. Things like we've got a good many pipelines that are identified that need to be replaced and upgraded due to some corrosion problems. So we're replacing some of those pipelines, doing some electrical upgrades for some of the motor control centers that we have, which is basically the switch gear for operating the facilities. Heat trace controls and doing some dike repairing and resealing of some of the dikes around some of these tank systems that we're talking about. So we do have plans for using the dollars effectively. It's going to beneficial use. We're also looking hard at other risk. We've done some risk evaluations and engineering evaluations of primarily the process waste system, but all of it, to identify where we have risks that should be addressed with potentially with some of this money. So moving to the next one, that's the liquid low-level waste. Now the process waste system treats primarily the lightly contaminated process water that comes from laboratory facilities in the lab, as well as EM facilities. The groundwater that comes from the SWASA areas is trucked over to this facility for processing. We also receive, there's collection systems are both hard piped and trucking. So there's pumping stations that pump it through hard pipes, but for example, over in the SWASAs, and the waste we get from the leachate at the MWMF is all trucked into the facility for processing. But there's a tank farm in each of the valleys. I don't have a picture of those on here, but there's one basically over at the REDC facility and at some of the facilities over there that collect wastewater from the groundwater drainage and collection systems at the SWASs, for example. And it's transferred over to the process waste treatment complex. There's two primary buildings that are used, Building 3608, which is the larger facility here, and Building 3544 make up the processing scheme. 3544 is the older of the two facilities, and it's primarily used as it's got ion exchange columns in it that treat the radiological component of the waters that come in. Mainly cesium and strontium is removed at this facility. And then the effluent from the 3544 facility is pumped up to the 3608 facility. 3608 is primarily a treatment facility that removes the organics, there's some slight mercury contamination that's removed up there, and basic pH adjustment before discharge through an NPDES permitted outfall. So these are the two facilities that treat about 110 million gallons per year, including about 2 million gallons of leachate from the EMWMF facility. I think that's all I was going to mention here, just to make sure. Yeah, in terms of the fractions of groundwater versus processed water, it's about half and half when it really comes down to it. So the last of the facilities in the LGWO systems are the gaseous system, and this is a photo of the main stack there in the central campus of Oak Ridge National Lab. That's where all the gaseous waste is discharged from, the 3039 stack. But the system consists of basically two systems. The central ventilation system has legs that collect ventilation from several building complexes around the lab, around the central campus of the lab. And then the hot off gas system is small volumes of higher radioactivity, and that system includes filtration and scrubber system that removes any radionuclides before it's discharged out through the 3039 stack. So about 100,000 cubic feet per minute is released from the stack. We're getting ready to do some inspections of these stacks. I think I've mentioned in some of our previous meetings some of the activities we're doing. We're getting very close to using a drone camera system that will fly up and sit on top of the stack, lower a camera down inside, and it'll take some video inspections of the interior of the stack. So we're getting ready to do that. It's a very cost-effective way. There's 3 tall stacks out there. We'll be doing all 3 of those stacks at the lab. Transuranic Waste Processing Center. This manages the characterization, treatment, and disposal of all the legacy and newly generated transuranic waste at the site. Just to translate and define for you, for those that may not be familiar with what transuranic waste is, it's generally a special class of waste that has higher concentrations greater than 20 nanocuries per gram of transuranic alpha-emitting radionuclides. Being alpha radionuclides, it makes it a pretty high hazard from a breathing perspective. And so you see in the photos, all of the waste processing is done within either hot cells or glove boxes so that we don't get people in contact with the waste that they're working on. The TWPC itself is a RCRA permitted. The waste that we have in storage is mixed waste. It's both RCRA contaminated and transient and radioactive. And so we have a RCRA permit for the facility. And in the facility, waste are sorted, characterized, and packaged. That'll be put into a form that can be disposed of either as transuranic waste at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant out in Carlsbad, New Mexico, or if it characterizes out as low-level waste, which much of it does, the low-level waste fraction is disposed of out at the Nevada National Security Site. Remote handled versus contact handled is basically 2 different types of waste that we process there. And that's basically defined by the dose rates that those wastes emit. If it's greater than 200 millirem per hour on a dose perspective, it's managed as remote handle waste, and it's managed in the glove box type of environment, or in the hot cell type of environment. If it's less than that, the glove boxes are sufficient to control the doses for the workers on that waste. So, and there's different disposal requirements at WIP for those two different types of waste that are processed. Oops, went too far. So here's the status of where we are in the processing of the entire legacy population that we have. We're making pretty good progress, even though WIP is shut down temporarily. We're still making progress, and I've got the last slide I'll show, which is the next slide, talks about the things that we've done to be able to continue working while WIP is not accepting waste. On the CH waste side, we had an inventory originally of about 1,579 cubic meters of waste. We're 94% completed with the processing and repackaging of that. About 66% of that waste has been shipped off-site and disposed. Much of that 66% was low-level waste that went to Nevada. The pie chart here shows the amount of the inventory that the total inventory versus what's left to be processed there. 92% or 92 cubic meters remains to be processed, and that's primarily we're getting down to the real hard stuff that's going to take a lot of effort to process, and so we still have about 3 or so years in our processing campaign to finish the processing of the debris. The remote handle waste, similar types of data here. The original volume was about 671 cubic meters. We've processed 507 of that, with about 164 remaining. So we're about 3/4 of the way done, 76%. About 25% of that waste inventory has been sent off-site. Much of the RH waste that was actually processed and characterized turned out to be contact handled due to the age of the waste, the aging of the radionuclides and so forth. Or just the fact that it wasn't very well characterized as what we thought it was RH, and turned out it was actually CH. But a lot of that that has been shipped was shipped out as contact handled, but we're continuing to make good progress on processing the RH waste. Should be done within the next 2 to 3 years on that as well. Now, WIP, as everyone knows, WIP had a couple of incidents a couple of years ago that has resulted in them being shut down for some deferred maintenance and some corrective actions that need to be made out there. So right now we are, WIP is not accepting waste. So right after that occurred, Oak Ridge, over the next several months, worked with headquarters to develop some alternate plans that would allow us to keep making progress on our waste processing plans. And so this slide is focused on just to discuss what we did do. Basically our strategy involves using the existing facilities, storage facilities over at UCOR at Yornell in our true storage facilities that are over there to transfer waste that has been processed and packaged and ready for disposal back to storage. So we're continuing we have plenty of storage capacity for processed CH true waste in those facilities. RH was a little more difficult to figure out a way of managing it because there's very limited storage at the facility for processed RH waste. And so DOE Oak Ridge worked with the site to develop a 72B canister overpack. The 72B is the canister that WIP uses for the disposal operation at WIP. And so all the RH waste that gets processed gets placed into 72B canisters for disposal. So as we generated these canisters, there's only a capacity of about 14 of those in the TWPC itself. So we had to develop a way of shielding those for storage and sending them back over to storage facilities there adjacent to the plant too that are operated by UCOR.
The research and national defense facilities of the Oak Ridge Reservation are vital parts of our nation's scientific community. To continue to meet these needs, parts of the reservation require cleanup from the impacts of years of energy research. The Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board is the voice of the community, providing input to the U.S. Department of Energy on its environmental cleanup of the reservation. To learn more about this important work, you're invited to attend meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board.